In this short quick fire video, we're going to be taking a look at interval quality. Now in part 1, we worked out interval distance. We learned that if we have an F and a B, then we count up the musical alphabet, F, G, A, B, and we know that it's a fourth as we've counted up 4 steps. But what if it's F sharp to B, or F to B flat, or even F to B sharp? Well, these are all still fourths, but their quality is what's different. So quality is another way of describing the interval distance to differentiate, to tell the difference between F to B flat or F to B sharp, for example. So in your theory exams, each interval is worth 2 marks. There's 1 mark for describing the distance and 1 mark for describing the interval quality. Okay, so there are 5 different types of interval quality that you will need to know. Firstly, we have the perfect, major and minor intervals. We also have diminished and augmented intervals, so just like our triads in a major and minor key. Firstly, let's take a look at perfect intervals. In every major and minor key we have 4 perfect intervals. They are the unison or the first, the fourth, the fifth and the octave. These intervals are all described as perfect as they stay the same in both the major and the minor keys. We cannot call them major or minor because they don't change. As long as you know your major keys, you will be able to work out all of the perfect intervals. So what's left? Well, now the major and the minor intervals. This is what's left over in our major and minor scale once we've taken out the perfect intervals. So that's the second, the third, the sixth and the seventh. These can all be major or minor. These are the intervals that, unlike the perfect intervals, can change depending on the tonality of the key. So let's always start in the major. For example, in C major we have D, E, A and B as the major second, third, sixth and seventh. To make these minor, all we have to do is lower them by a semitone. D flat, E flat, A flat and B flat would become the minor second, the minor third, the minor sixth and the minor seventh. All of these intervals, perfect, major and minor, can also be augmented and diminished. To augment something means that we just make it bigger, and we do this by making the interval larger by a semitone. In the same way, to diminish something means to make it smaller. So we do this by making the interval smaller by a semitone. Let's take a look at augmented and diminished perfect intervals. So to make a perfect interval augmented, we make it bigger by 1 semitone, either at the top or the bottom of the interval. To make a perfect interval diminished, we make it smaller by 1 semitone, to either the top or the bottom note of the interval. For example, C to G is a perfect fifth. If we had C to G sharp, so we've augmented that interval, we would have an augmented fifth. And if we had C to G flat, we've made that interval smaller, it would be a diminished fifth. To augment the major, we make it bigger by a semitone. To diminish the minor, we make it smaller by a semitone. Remember that major and minor intervals already have a semitone between them, so we can only augment the major and diminish the minor, because the minor is already a semitone lower than the major. Okay, we're going to have a look at a few examples now. Before we do, I always like to work out the intervals by thinking in the major key of the bottom note. So we take the bottom note, think of the major key and use that to work out the other intervals. So let's have a look at this first example here. This was taken from a grade 3 paper which asks you to fully describe the melodic interval. It's called melodic because the notes are separate. So let's start with the distance. We've got a D, and a C sharp. So let's count up D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We know that that is a seventh. So let's write 7 where it says number. Now let's work out the type. All we have to do is think of the major key of the bottom note. So we've got D. So let's think of D major. Is C sharp in D major? Yes. So that is the major 7th. Okay, so let's have a look at this example, and this one is from a grade 5 paper. So we've got a D to a G sharp. We count up D, E, F, G. We know it's a fourth. Now usually we'd have a perfect fourth in D major, D, E, F sharp, G. We don't usually have G sharp in G major. The G sharp has made that interval bigger by a semitone. So we know that that is an augmented fourth. Okay, another one, also from a grade 5 paper. We've got A to E flat, and we know it's E flat because we've got the key signature there of B flat major. So A to E flat, we'll count up A, B, C, D, E. We know it's a fifth. And if we think in the scale of A major, we'd usually have A, B, C sharp, D, E. That would be our perfect fifth. But the flat has made that perfect fifth smaller. So we know that that is a diminished fifth. Okay, now for our final example. This is from a grade 5 paper, and this one is a little bit different. You will notice that this interval goes over an octave. If any interval goes over an octave, we continue counting up. So octave, 9th is the same as a second, 10th, same as a third, 11th, same as a fourth, and so on. Or we simply say compound, meaning 2 octaves and then the smaller interval. For example, here we have A, B, C. We know that's a third. However, it's not here, but it's here. It's over an octave. So we know that that is a compound third. Now let's work out the quality. A, B, C sharp is in the key of A major, so we know that is a compound major third.